Oh, thank you, Stephen. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So I have two main goals for this presentation. The first one is what Stephen had already highlighted, the amazing Benjamin. I met Benjamin in my class. I teach a mindfulness course in HDFS, Human Development Family Studies, in 2015. That's what Benjamin reminded me. Was it around 2015? And since
Yes.
then, Benjamin has done wonderful things, and I want you to feel inspired by what Benjamin has done. My second goal for this presentation is just really an introduction around mindfulness in terms of gross national presence. You've heard of gross national product, right? Like we're all striving, like we got to do things and we got to make and be productive, and that's why we're all busy. But we forget that the most precious gift is our presence. So I want to talk about how do we deep dive deep into presence. And maybe if the world had GNP in terms of gross national presence, we would be a much healthier and happier place with lots of cheers on our face. So Benjamin, why don't you introduce yourself briefly? Here we
Thank you,
go.
Dr. Lei.
Yeah.
I love the economics jargon you put into this presentation, so thank you very much. Hello, so I'm really humbled to be here. My name is Benjamin Chu. I'm currently 30 years old. I was raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. Um, so for my education, just like to share with you, as Dr. Lei said, back then it was called Family Resources, but it was more dealing with family studies. I received my Bachelor's of Science in 2015. I received my Master's in Economics in 2019, and then now I'm expected to receive my PhD, my doctoral degree in economics at the end of the academic year in 2023 of spring. Um, so I have gone a lot of pathways in my journey, as to an individual right now, where I'm happy to say that I'm currently a university lecturer. So I teach courses in economics and data science at the university from the past 3 years. I also work as a research assistant doing a lot of work in data science as well. And as was mentioned earlier, yes, I am at 2 years old. I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, which was a very difficult challenge for my family because my mother at the time she was a working in family practice as a physician. When she heard the news that I had autism, the doctors actually told her that I probably would never recover. I'd have to be cared for the rest of my life, in severe care. And my IQ tested at the time was around 40. So there was little hope for me at the time. But my mother, exhausting all resources, only finding one book published with Care for Autism at the time, she quit her job and sought to take care of me, even though she had two other children at the time, with another third one being born later on. So she's really the hero. Everyone says that I'm a hero, but she really is the hero to me. So I'm very humbled for that. And I think it's a blessing that I'm here doing what I'm doing. And I'm hoping that I can inspire people to never give up on themselves and, always to keep hoping. So thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. So, as what was it? As Stephen mentioned, I am an author of 3 children's book, and this is a shameless opportunity for me to let you know that I am going to be doing a book reading next on Sunday, October 30th at Barnes and Noble. So please bring your children down. I would love to see you. I'm not supposed to give the book away because it's at Barnes and Noble, but just we can do it on the side, outside the bookstore if you want. If you have an extra copy, I'm happy to give them to you because they're actually copies that I've given away, about 4,000 copies across the island. So I am a professor and chair in family consumer sciences in human development and family studies, one of our unit that Benjamin majored in. So we're going to talk about stress. So the previous presenter had a wonderful presentation around stress, but how does it look like and how do you know? And that was the question in the chat. How do you know when your child is stressed? What are some of the signs? And we all manifest stress differently, right? Even though the feeling and the physiological mechanism may be the same, but here are some ways in which you may detect and comes to your awareness that your child may be stressful. Trouble eating, relaxing, sleeping, um, increased clinginess, whining, crying, fighting, tummy aches, right? Recurring tummy aches, thumb sucking, fingernail biting, rocking, teeth grinding, irritability, sadness, panic, anger, or with becoming withdrawn, avoiding others, increased behaviors such as biting, kicking, poor listening, and acting out, low energy or high energy. So these are some ways in which children manifest when they're particularly stressed. And sometimes we do it as well as adults, although we don't bite others, but we bite with our words, right? We don't bite physically, but some of our words can be very biting and painful to other people. So when we're stressed, as the previous presenter talked about, we we consume a lot of budget in terms of, oh, why is there like a line on my what if? um, when we're stressed, we have, and I use a financial term because Benjamin is in economics, we have a finite sets of energy in both in our mind and in our body. Stress actually consumes a lot of energy. It consumes a lot of our body budget because all that's cortisol and epinephrine that the body needs to use to manage that stress response, as well as our brain. Our brain, 20% of the energy is consumed by our brain, and our brain, the brain that the different parts of the brain that manages stress, it takes a lot of energy for that, what we call the reptilian system or the mammalian system of our brain, to figure out what we're going to do, with that stressor. So the availability of energy for creative problem solving, for understanding, for taking a pause, it's not available because when we're stressed, it takes so much of our energy to manage that stressor. And why is that important? Because then that energy to solve that problem, right, to figure out what we need to do, it's not become available because it's been consumed to figure out how we're going to manage with this stressor. So why mindfulness then, right? As one strategy, it's not the only strategy because there's many other ways in which you can invite the stress, relaxation, and respond. But because one of the ways in which we can help with stress management is to understand what is going on in our mind. Because the mind, again, consumes a lot of energy. So if we're not aware of what's going on and how we're perceiving that stressor and how we're responding, then it can lead to what we call an unhappy mind. If you're sitting here right now, you're listening to me, but are you really listening to me? Or maybe you're listening to the thoughts that's going through your mind. And this one pivotal study, when they did a random sample with adults, they just asked simple questions. How are you feeling right now? You can ask yourself this. How are you feeling right now? What are you doing right now? Well, hopefully you're just listening to me, but maybe you are all doing something else. Maybe you're making coffee and doing the dishes, right? Doing laundry, who knows, right? What are you doing right now? And are you thinking about something other than what are you doing? Are you thinking about other than just listening to what am I saying? So just these simple questions. And they found out that for most of us, we actually do mind wandering. Our mind is not here. You physically could be here, but your mind is somewhere else. It could be in the past, running to the future, planning the next thing that you got to do after the Zoom presentation. And what is the consequences of that when you're not fully here? The consequences, what they found out is that we're unhappy. Why? Because if you're not here, you rather do something else. That means you're not happy doing what you're doing right now. Right? You rather do something else. And it's a pernicious habit that we have. We don't really have that ability as much unless you cultivate that to be fully present. Because our culture is designed to multitask and to be on our phone and click, 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 and their attention, there goes my attention, right? So what pulls your attention? Well, we have our five senses. What pulls your attention right now? You're listening to me. Your sound says, I'm hearing something. Your sight, you're paying attention right now, right? With if you have vision, right? Smell, probably not, right? Your dial of smell, is there's something particular, strong odor, that dial is down. Touch, right? Well, unless I tell you to feel that sensation on the bottom of your butt, you're not going to put attention right there, right? Or feel like the breeze on your face. Until I ask you to do that, it's not there, right? So we have, and taste. Well, we did, and what did I miss? Did I miss anything else? Smell. Five senses. What did I not have in here? There's another sense, the mind sense. Because not only are you hearing, seeing, but you're hearing, seeing with this chatter. understand. What is she talking about? This mind sense. What? What? Oh my God, that's true. Right? So then you're not listening to me, you're listening to your thoughts. Right? So the mind sense often interfere with our five senses. And why is this important? Well, for children, like Benjamin mentioned, when he was 2 with autism, all these, if you think of the dial tones like on a volume, imagine if we take it for granted that right now that the sound tone is amplified because you're paying attention to sound and sight. Maybe that sight and sound, those volumes right now, sight and sound volume are up. The other volumes, smell, touch, are down. But for children with autism, all the volumes are up. Oh my God, right? It's not just sight and sound, there's everything else. All the volumes are up, the sight sound, the smell sensation, the touch. So then the mind sense comes in, engage with the five senses and said, oh, the lights are too bright. My mom perfume is too strong. Too many people are talking. The fabric, oh my God, it's itching me. This tastes weird, right? If you imagine all the volumes are up, it's overwhelming, completely overwhelming. We take it for granted that these sense volumes we can modulate. That's the ability. It's a natural thing that we do, but not necessarily for other people, right? So how do you learn how to modulate those sensory modality? Because otherwise you're overwhelmed and very stressed. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is learning really how to modulate these different sensory modality, which one sensory modality is hugely influential is the mind sense. Because not only are you feeling the touch, but the mind sense comes in and says, I don't like that. It's just disturbing to me. Oh my God, it's too bright. What does that smell, right? The mind sense jumps in and then it disturbs your ability to just pay attention, right? So if you're asking a child, pay attention. What do you mean pay attention? You pay attention to the sound, to the smell, to the touch? What do you mean? Because all of that is, I'm paying attention to everything right now, right? So how do you get the child to learn how to regulate? Well, who you are as an adult is huge, and as a parent, because your ability to regulate your stress and your sensory modality, they feel it, they pick it up, they tune in, and they begin to learn themselves how to regulate, right? So how to practice? You often hear the breath, but the breath is not only the only way, right? With children with disability, you have to find what is the sense that works with them the best. Maybe for someone it's touch. When they're getting overwhelmed, just focus on feeling, like just feeling. Or if it's smell, right? Just smell. All the attention. Because it's the ability to focus the attention and to be aware this is what's happening right now. And the attitude of acceptance, which means whatever is going on, I am okay. I am safe. That's hugely important, right? So part of what we do is like finding what is your sensory bodily anchor. It could be the breath. It could be a pen because I'm feeling the pen. Could be a stuffed animal. Oh, it's so soft. I'm just gonna feel that soft animal. It could be a cat. I'm pulling the cat ear because for some people, like, or petting a cat, right? Or a dog. Why is it so relaxing? Because you're feeling, if you're all the attention, all the awareness is on one sensory modality. You're not being overwhelmed with everything else, including the mind sense, all those thoughts that's spurring through. So it's finding what works for you, what works for the child. So Benjamin, why don't you share with our what are you guys called? See, look at my mind just went, phew, I don't know what you guys call the attendees about your own experience with mindfulness and how you came to discover what was your anchor.
Of course. Thank you so much. I think Dr. Lay put some excellent points, especially those with hypersensitivity. So one of the first things of hypersensitivity is that Dr. Lay was correct, that a lot of the senses are very amplified in the way that children of autism perceive them. So some examples were, even in Dr. Lay's class, and she's gonna laugh about this, but she was writing with a certain color of scented marker, and no one else could smell it but me. And this allowed me to feel very dizzy and nauseous, where I actually had to excuse myself from class just to sit down for a bit. So, and I was surprised how no one else could tell that. Another example is looking, me being half Chinese, I went to Chinese New Year and we'd have the lion dances play or kind of go around. And the noise, like the banging of the gongs, many people just like giving money and just crowding around. That was something for me that was hard to deal with. And quite frankly, I would cry and I would run away. So some of the strategies that I did that weren't necessarily coping strategies were more avoidance, where my biggest solution as a child would be running away. And some parents ask their people, why do my child run away when they're stressed? And the answer is because they want to remove themselves from the situation and to get into the state of calmness. Other things I would do is we see children do, I'd hit my ears, and when I heard something too loud, I would hit my ears and just like roll on the ground, spinning in circles. And those are things that are called autism stimming behavior. I would click my pen when I get anxious, but it would annoy all of my teachers. So, and I even would wrap myself in blankets when I'd be I would try to go sleep and I'd wrap myself in blankets, like a very tight sushi roll, pretty much. So the thing is, when you get older, or even not when you're older, just in general, when you're in public, how do you turn these strategies into more feasible ones? Because idealistically, these are not very practical solutions in everyday situations. I mean, how many of you would want to go feel like taking a nap during the middle of an assignment where you're just completely overworked and stressed out? I think a lot of people do. So the solution to this was honestly focusing on mindfulness. And I've practiced it even without me realizing that I practice it at times. So some examples, breathing is a very common example, but from my personal experience, I just loved observing. I think that one of the greatest gifts I've had is being able to observe things. I remember telling Dr. Lei one time I was extremely overwhelmed in her class. No fault to her, this is just overwhelmed with people. And I asked her, excuse me, can I go outside and look at the trees for a second? So I took 5 minutes looking at the trees, looking at the nature. When I was younger, I would look at different clouds forming. I did cloud watching. This made me feel relaxed because I would only focus on what I was seeing. Even something mentally where I swear I'm not making this up, I would be reciting math problems in my head. When I was in middle school, high school, I'd recite math problems because it gave me something to think about. So in those practical examples, I was demonstrating mindfulness where I'm being present in the actual moment without getting my mind too distracted. And that's also relating to the sixth sense, which Dr. Lei mentioned as well, where the sixth sense is not just things that I can actually physically encounter or physically feel, but also what's building up in my mind, this sort of chatter in my mind and this distractedness that I feel. Because I felt that when I would make up such hallucinations or illusions in my head where I would imagine myself being in uncomfortable social situations, and I would think, oh, someone's thinking this about me, or what do people think about this in me? It became very distracting for me and allowed my mind to wander. So what was helpful for me is to demonstrate these activities of mindfulness in a sense where I can allow myself to focus and allow myself to center. So I learned the difference between coping and avoidance. So.
And then how did you continue on after the class? And
Well,
Benjamin?
after I took that time to calm myself down, so focusing on things like such as not breathing as hard, having my heart rate rest back to normal. Eventually, I was able to just tell myself everything's going to be okay. Just reassuring myself. Sometimes you're not going to have people around you, even though you have so many people that probably love you. You're not going to have people around you that's going to tell you everything's going to be okay at that moment. So sometimes you have to convince yourself. You have to tell yourself, repeat it over and over. It's going to be okay. So just to really empower yourself and to have this sort of presence in the moment that, as of right now, you don't worry about what happened before, what happens in the future, just how you're feeling right now and what you can do now. So I told myself it will be okay. I went into the classroom, and to my surprise, no one's talking about where it was been, or no one was wondering where I was. So sometimes, the biggest fears that you have and what you fear people may feel are actually maybe is what's inside of you, what you're making up or conjuring up.
Yes, and Benjamin is mentioning something that the previous presenter alluded to, like having words that you repeat, the repetition over and over again, like I am okay, I'm worthy, right? I'm of value. It's human to make a mistake. It's just repeating that every time that your mind kind of goes a little too much. If you just have those repetitive words and you keep saying, I'm okay, I'm okay. It's human to make mistake. That the mind is, you're training the mind to go to that instead of the negative comment or the negative criticism that we can be very good at, right? We pick up, that's the negative affective bias, that we pick up the negative. So it's training your mind to go to those positive affirmations over and over and over again. The repetition is, it's very important. So young people need your presence, right? And you can only do that when you are present. So now I'm switching over a little bit to how important adults in children's life are, because we have what we call them. There's another slide, talk about mirror neurons. So how the child is, how they're feeling, it's a lot. They're tuning in to how you're feeling. They're not feeling safe because you don't feel safe. If you don't feel safe with your own mental state, if you're not feeling safe in your own emotions, believe you me, the child is picking it up. That's why adults are hugely important. If teachers are stressed, the child's picking up all that. So mindfulness is about knowing, where am I right now? Am I feeling overwhelmed? And if I am feeling overwhelmed, how do I know to dial that down? Otherwise, if you don't know how to dial that down, that's a lot of the energy budget, remember I talked about, is being used to manage that stressor, which then is not available for you to make that connection with that child. Right? Because we only have a finite budget amount of energy, of time, as well as of presence. So when you are feeling overwhelmed, what do? Right? One of the most helpful things is just take a pause. Just take a pause. Because why? Because all the sensory modality, right now, particularly in the mind, is on high volume, right? So even taking a 5 minutes so that the volume of the mind can just like go down to like from a 10 to maybe an 8 to a 7, because you're focusing on one modality, like Benjamin talked about. He goes out, looks at the tree, so it's focused on the sight. The sight volume is going up, so then hopefully the mind one is going down a bit. So that 5 minutes just to reset, it's really important. Cultivating presence, right? So mindfulness practice can help us to cultivate presence, be more emotionally available, and manage stress skillfully. So let me just guide you very briefly and see, for you to discover which of your sensory modality works best for you. Right? And we use, it's called open awareness as well as focus awareness. So in open awareness right now, I'm just going to ask you right now what's coming into your attention. And you just notice how quickly the mind shifts from one sense modality to the next. For instance, sound. And are you hearing sound beyond the confines of your room? Is maybe sound is even reaching further out into the streets, right? That's the sound modality. That's open awareness. Maybe the birds are singing, the winds is rustling. I don't know where you are, but maybe there's multiple sound, right? That's open awareness, when you're opening your awareness to recognize all the different sound. But then focus awareness is you pay attention to one sound, like the sound of my voice. But not only the sound of my voice, but do you notice the silence between the next word? Or do you notice your mind comes in and like already filling up the silence, right? Then you're aware that there's a mind sense that jumps in with the sound sense. Or maybe let's look at touch. And if you want to close your eyes so that you can really get into the sense modality of the tactile, you can just turn down the volume of the sight. The volume of the sound is still slightly up because you're hearing my guidance. And I'm going to ask you to put the attention to the bottom of your feet right now. And just notice how that feels at the bottom of your feet. Can you feel your feet touching the floor? Just noticing if it feels heavy, warm, tight. And again, whatever sensations arising, just simply let it be. And then notice if the mind sense comes in to make a comment or a judgment. And if that happens, it's okay. Go back to the felt sensation, the feeling of the feet. And the mind jumps in, takes you somewhere else. Go back to the felt sensation, feeling the feet. Focus awareness on the felt sense of the feet, however the feet is right now, and however you're feeling. Even if the mind is racing to another thought, it's okay. Come back to how the feet are feeling. Now we're going to switch to smell. Right? The awareness, you're just turning down the dial of the tactile and focusing, amplifying the sense smell. And just recognize whatever smell is arising to your nose right now. Notice when the mind jumps in and has a comment about what it is that you're smelling or not smelling. And come back to smelling. And I'm going to ask you to just come to your breath and notice how the breath is manifesting, whatever the breath is right now in this moment. And just notice how you're breathing. Is it soft, or is it measured and labored? That's okay. However the breath is, just bring your awareness to the breathing sensation. One breath at a time. Again, notice when the mind jumps in and says, oh, I'm not doing this correct, or what? It's too fast. Whatever it is, just recognize that mind sense and come back to the breathing sensation. And then you notice the sound came in to distract us and to come back. I invite you to open your eyes again. Right? So it's discovering for yourself which sense modality helps you to come to presence the most. Because how do you know? The less interference with the mind coming in. And if the mind comes in, it's okay. Just recognize it, come back to the sense modality. And you realize how hard that is, right? Because we've trained the mind to be so strong in our culture that we've forgotten how just to be with the senses, with the body. And why is this important? Because just like I've taken in a feral cat in the last year, I thought the feral cat was mute for a whole year. Didn't say anything. Even when I caught it to go get it spayed, nothing. And then all of a sudden, meow, meow. Why? Because it felt safe, right? And it didn't touch me, right? Because it's feral. It's a crazy feral cat. But now, because it feels safe, it wants to be touched. Well, I wouldn't say it does. I can't touch the cat because it's feral, but it will touch me. It weaves around my leg, even after I feed it. Why? Because it feels safe. And it took a year. So patience, not wanting things to happen the way you want it, but the way it comes about naturally. Why? Because you have so much presence and you create this safety for this being to discover itself. Right? And who knows, maybe one day this feral cat will allow me to actually touch it. And if it doesn't, it's okay too, right? On its own terms. Mirror neurons. So even the cat can feel me, right? Can feel. If you imagine a cat can feel, a feral cat can feel whether I'm stressed or not stressed. I imagine your children, the children in our lives, they feel you, right? If you're stressed, they feel stressed and they don't know why they feel this way, right? So the more that you're able to tune in into your relaxation, they feel that too. Because when they're overwhelmed. And if that triggers you to be overwhelmed, oh my goodness, that's like 2 volume on high 1010. Oh no, right? So if you're able to dial down your to a 5, it will tune into them and they begin to feel, they don't know why, but they begin to feel also that sense of relaxation. So it's very important for us with mindfulness, helps us to know how we're feeling and to tune in to how the other being is feeling. Stress, expectations, and judgments, it's wanting something than other than what is happening. And we're such a hypercritical society that we want ourselves to be perfect, that I got to be a perfect parent. There's no such thing as perfection. You are simply good enough. If you just keep saying that, good enough, it's good enough. There's no need for more. Right? It's gross national present, not product. Don't do more. Because if you do more, it's going to be doo-doo. No more do, right? It's presence. Right? Doing takes you out of presence, whatever it is, but there's discernment. I'm not saying, of course, there has to be some correction. It's discerning what is the correct action. And that only happens when you have good judgment, is when you're relaxed, not when you're stressed. Never do anything when you're on stress. Take a break if you're stressed. Never make any decisions. Never do anything. Never say anything. Never do anything when you're stressed, right? Because you're not operating at your highest level. So, what time is it? Oh dear, I want Benjamin to have some time. I'll go back to the attitudes and how this is important, but I want Benjamin to share about his mindfulness journey and where he is now.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Lay. So I kind of want to turn this into a different perspective, where the current journey I'm going right now is this acceptance with me, where I am in my life right now. So growing up, I was, it's a very humble beginning for me. I would describe my experience as having autism. It was sort of like singing, but without having a voice in that sense, or not knowing the words. There are many times where I was very social and loving. I think I had this great altruistic sense of trying to make friends and meet people. But every time I try to talk to somebody, I couldn't form the words, or I couldn't relate to somebody, or they weren't interested. They weren't reciprocating their conversation with me. And it was difficult. And I felt that navigating through those social norms was something that took a lot of practice for me. And quite frankly, in all honesty, I'm still learning to master as well. But what I've learned over the years is that I tried so hard trying to be what I felt was perfect, what I felt was the standard of how to act and behave, in the sense of not necessarily manners. I was taught manners at a young age, but more on trying to talk socially. But kind of the perspective I had was, one of the greatest things I did was working with children with special needs. So I worked at a summer fund for quite some time. And one day I met a child who had Down syndrome. And so I get a little emotional talking about it, but they saw something that never happened before, where I was a summer fund leader and I took care of her. And she was only about 5 years old. She was really wonderful, really cute. And what really made me emotional was the fact that the kids were just so wonderful and caring for her. Like, what I experienced, I faced a lot of prejudice and sorry, I faced a lot of prejudice and difficulties, but what I saw of them is that they accepted her as a true friend. And it made me feel happy about where I was and where I can see moving forward. So it made me realize that what's most important, I don't know why I'm crying, I'm so sorry. What's more important is that to really love and accept yourself and to be present with yourself, not worrying about where you are in the future, but where you are now. And now I know not everyone can be very accepting, but I don't know, it's that story, it felt for me was empowering, that I used to be so ashamed that I had autism. I hid it from everybody. I used to make up stories telling them, I don't have it. But I feel like just everything I've accomplished has been humbling, and I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm crying. I just realized that there's no other person I'd rather be but me. I don't care that I'm a little awkward at times. I will admit that. There are times when I have perfect pitch. There are times when I told people, you're off tune a little bit, but ultimately, I love what I'm doing right now, and I love who I am. And I love the fact that I can keep moving on. So I think that's something I've learned for myself. Is just it's tested me over time, being getting my PhD, never being told I never could succeed, and I was told by teachers, by my peers. I was even told in the PhD program that someone told me I would never succeed. I would never get my PhD, but I'm close to publishing one of my papers. It's an accomplishment that hasn't been seen at the university in about 15 years for my department. And I also received a federal job offer to work at CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, as a health economist. So all those worries I had in the future, thinking that I could never succeed in the program, I could never graduate with my PhD, I could never get a good job. Those were all fake. Those were all things I made up in my mind because I was focusing on what would happen in the future, not what I'm doing right now. And I realized that living my life, just taking it there step by step and just overcoming every obstacle that I face is what really helped me grow. And now I serve as an inspiration to others, but also I feel like in a weird way, I'm inspiring myself, telling myself that I am so proud of what I've done, and I'm going to keep thinking about these moments for me to move forward in the ever cases that I doubt myself. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm crying. I'm so sorry.
No, there's no need for you to be so. Benjamin, if you should read the chat, they're just loving you so much. They're all feeling so inspired by you and how courageous for your sharing and vulnerability. And Benjamin was just like that when he was in my class. He was a joy. He would be the first one to share when, you know, how sometimes teachers like, oh God, no one say anything. But Benjamin would be always the first one to share. And so he was such a delight. And you can see how much, Benjamin, you should read what people are sharing in your chat. So I think Benjamin, with those expression, he hit the very important point about loving kindness, right? For yourself, as well as for others. So part of what the mindfulness requires, not required, because I don't want to make that a requirement, that the attitude around how we do the practice is hugely important. And the attitude of being kind to yourself, right? The ability to say, I'm good enough the way I am. Right. And you're more than good enough, Benjamin. Right. You're amazing. So I'm gonna end our presentation here and open it up for questions because I'm sure, Benjamin, there's many questions for you. Yes.
I think I've been here 6 or 7 times. The first time I've ever cried. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to it. Maybe it's just that story. I keep just seeing the beauty of like being accepted, you're different, but you're not less. And so that's a quote from Temple Grant that I've always loved, that you're different, but not less. You only see yourself as less when you think that what people tell you is true. And often it's not true. Like I know it sounds cliche, but I truly believe that we're all special and unique in our own way. Mm-hmm. And no one else should tell us otherwise.
Any questions for Benjamin? I guess I can moderate. I don't know who's.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee and Benjamin. There was a question in the chat. It was if you could give some insight on how to teach or give tools to a person with autism who is lower functioning, on how to identify sensory triggers and maybe how to advocate to ensure their comfort level.
This is a question for me or Dr. Lay?
It didn't specify, I think, either.
I'm going to give it to you, Benjamin. Yes.
So, sorry, one more time. The question on just coping or?
So I think this question came about when they were talking about dialing in the senses and how you try to focus on one to find where your comfort level was. That's about when this question came about. So again, it was how to teach, to give tools to a person with autism who's lower functioning, and I think has very little communication skills, and how to identify their sensory triggers and how to advocate to ensure their comfort.
I think that's an excellent question. So typically my experience of working with children, I just want to disclose, I am not an expert in this field by any means, but from my experience, it's really just trying to understand, tailor to what they're interested in and what really, affects them personally. So I think then that way where for example, I had a child with autism as well, so that I've taken care of as well. And one of the things that she loved to do was just running back and forth, and in terms of just releasing stress or just releasing excitement. So in ways that I felt that whenever she was overwhelmed, I would try to run back and forth in the field with her. I say, come on, let's go for a run. And I would run with her back and forth. And I think for her, like, we all have different senses that we focus on in terms of bringing us into a relaxing, calming state. And I think doing something that's even more enjoyable brings motivation. So when I ran back and forth in the field with her, we eventually sat down, and she was able to calm after that. I think that was, I mean, I'm putting a little bit more simplistically. I think this is something that I can relate to from a personal experience, but it's just really being able to understand the interests of your child, and as well being able to sort of bond with them, to let them know that you're interested as well. Mhm.
I think it has to do with a lot of, it's just discovering, and part of the discovery, it's going to take some time to find out which sensory modality works best. Because we all are different. It's not a one size fits all. So it's and that's the attention and the awareness is crucial, right? The more you're able to just observe and notice which sensory modality seems to help with that emotional regulation. And that's going to take some time, right? It's not going to be an automatic discovery. So having patience with yourself as well.
I have another question that came in for Benjamin, and it is, at what age would you consider introducing mindful meditation to a child?
I think that's really for Dr. Lay, but I guess I can answer that. So I guess I wouldn't really think of necessarily a specific age. I think I think it's important, for any child really to have sort of that discipline to be able to sit down and to relax. I think a lot of times as children, it's difficult because they're very hyper. For myself, I was a hyper one. I actually exhibit the same behaviors of running back and forth. My mother always tried to chase me because I always loved to run forward and back. But I'd honestly say that, as a way, in a way where you feel that you can in the way that you can feel that you can bond with them, in a sense that where you feel they can be very receptive to the kind of the behaviors they do, and the way that they can mirror what you do. So maybe as soon as possible. Sorry, I wouldn't be able to answer that too well.
Yeah, and Dr. Lay, do you want to jump in?
According to the research, I think that the youngest they've said is even 3 to 4 year olds, when they start developing the ability for language, and the language process can come in and start identifying, and that sort of object permanence, then it's finding out which sensory modality and which object gives that ability to regulate those emotions. And I would say start early, because that's when you're wiring the brain to be able to do those practices, because repetition is key. Right? So if you start them early, then it's more likely those connections among the neurons gets connected earlier, and then they know this is what they need to do when they're feeling overwhelmed or stressful. Because when you're a child, you don't understand what is going on, right? You just express yourself in the way that you know how. And our primitive brain system have been so wired strongly that that's the default habit that we just automatically do, right? So this ability to have that, to regulate, that's really a later development, but that doesn't mean that you cannot start early to start strengthening those pathways and connections.
Hi, this
Great.
next question is for Benjamin. This is in regards to your speaking. A parent mentioned that how did you get through the hard time of not being able to talk to getting to communicate and speak as well as you do today?
I think it just may sound surprising, but this actually lasted quite some time for myself, where I may have been more verbal in middle school and high school, but I wouldn't be able to really communicate with any of my peers. So, and I was very reserved and shy. And so what I did to help practice was actually starting beginning of high school. I had the opportunity to work at a summer fund, like daycare center, where I worked with children with special needs and also other typically developing children as well. So from my personal experience, actually being able to work with children in a population that I personally didn't feel that would necessarily have judged me, a population that I felt more secure and safe in. Because children itself, but one of the beautiful things about children is that, they don't hold social norms as dear to them compared to other populations. That's the reality. So I think for that, it really helped me being able to be put in a role where I could learn how to work with other children, because I felt in a way my social development was delayed when I was in high school. I felt like but by the time I got to high school, I was in middle school. And when I was in middle school, I was in elementary school in terms of how I could socialize. So being in a role where I felt I could thrive in and feel confident in is what really helped me learn how to speak. And eventually, even when I first taught at the university as well, I personally felt my experiences working with children really translated to being able to teach to university students.
Wow, that was amazing. So the last question before we go on break, we'd like to ask the both of you is, what is the most important lesson you would like today's audience to take away about mindfulness today?
I think the most important lesson, and I might have got sidetracked with this when I was crying, I apologize, but the most important lesson is to really not fear for the future or worry about the past. And that's coming from someone who has done both in extremes. So, when I first started, just when I was first, even from humble beginnings of being diagnosed and such, there's always that concern of never feeling that you could, as a parent, you never worry that your child could recover. And even as I got older, when I became more conscious about my own behaviors and realized that I was different due to the stereotypes and the prejudice that I was facing, I began wanting that for myself, that I could never be like anybody else. And so for me, the mindfulness presence is it's not only being present in the moment in the sense that you are being aware of what you are now, but it's also in terms of acceptance, as Dr. Lay has mentioned. So as I told you before, I was very ashamed seeing, letting people know or having people find out I had autism, or I needed having one-to-one, or I needed to, see therapy and such. But the moment where I felt like I truly accepted that and embraced that and said, I'm autistic, but different, but not less. I think for me personally, it's when I started to really grow. And it was easy because my mother, in a sense, also accepted that fact too, that she realized, she tells me, just you have to be you. God made you who you are now. And you're not, and he wouldn't make you anything different. I love you just the way you are now. So having that support from my mother personally and my siblings really empowered me to grow as well. So yeah, I think being mindful is necessarily being happy with where you are now and not worrying about what's going to be fearing in the future. Because even with my own research and my PhD, I've done things that I never thought I could ever do. And I probably wouldn't have done them if I spent all my time focusing on what if.
So I'll just end really brief because Benjamin has touched on all the important points. So I'll just say, many people say unconditional love, but what is unconditional love? It means unconditional acceptance. That's mindfulness.
Okay, I'm not crying, you're crying. Thank you both to Thao and Ben. You know why, Ben? Because we're parents and we feel this very closely to our heart. So thank you for sharing. Look at me, I'm all verklempt as well, because we are caring for our children and wanting the best for them. And you give us hope that our kids will grow and succeed and be accepted in their life. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
I need a 5-minute break.